Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Elliot Hayes always thought of himself as a numbers guy. At 37, he worked as a financial analyst at a respected firm in Los Angeles, California, where his ability to spot inconsistencies in complex spreadsheets was almost legendary. He could detect a single penny out of place among millions of dollars. That same analytical skill that made him invaluable at work began showing up at home in a way he never imagined he'd need. Fiona Hayes, his 34-year-old wife, was a freelance commercial photographer with an impressive portfolio that included campaigns for regional brands and emerging small businesses. They'd met at an art exhibition 6 years earlier, married after 2 years of dating, and built a life that seemed solid. They lived in a 2-story house in Silver Lake, owned 2 cats, and took weekend walks in Griffith Park. Their routine was comfortable, predictable, safe. Until it wasn't. The first anomaly Elliot noticed was subtle. Fiona had always left her phone on the kitchen table, unlocked, without a care in the world. They shared passwords for everything: Netflix, banking, email. It was an unspoken agreement of transparency that never needed discussing. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday in October, Elliot realized her phone was always face down. And when she went to the bathroom, she took it with her. When it rang, she checked the screen before answering, something she'd never done before. 3 days later, Elliot tried using her phone to check the weather while his was charging. The screen asked for a passcode. Fiona had switched to a 6-digit code. When he casually asked about it, she replied with an offhand smile, "Oh, a banking app asked me to boost security. You know how these things are." The explanation made sense. Almost. Then came the creative workshops. Fiona had always attended photography events, but they'd been occasional, maybe once a quarter. Suddenly, she had commitments nearly every week. Tuesday and Thursday nights. Saturday afternoons. "Networking is essential in this industry, Elliot," she'd explain while getting dressed more carefully than usual. "I need to maintain connections if I want to grow." He wanted to believe it. Tried to believe it. But something in his chest tightened every time she walked out the door wearing that perfume she rarely used at home. Elliot started noticing other details. Credit card statements showed charges at coffee shops Fiona never mentioned. She laughed more at her phone, a low, intimate laugh he hadn't heard directed at him in months. When he tried to start conversations about her day, her answers were vague, generic. It was fine. Nothing much. Then she'd change the subject or say she was tired. One night, while Fiona was in the shower, Elliot picked up her phone. His hands trembled slightly as he tried their anniversary date. Denied. Her birthday. Denied. Their old code. Denied. After 3 attempts, the phone temporarily locked him out. He put it back exactly where he'd found it, his heart pounding hard against his ribs. He felt dirty, intrusive, but also desperate for answers she clearly wasn't offering voluntarily. The next day, he tried the shared laptop in their home office. Fiona mostly used it for photo editing and sending proposals. Elliot opened the browser, checked the history. It was clean. Completely wiped. He checked the downloads folder, recent documents, nothing out of the ordinary. It was as if she'd become digitally invisible, leaving only carefully curated traces behind. Frustration built up like steady pressure in his mind. He wasn't a detective. He didn't know how to hack passwords or track someone. And part of him refused to believe he needed to do any of this. This was Fiona. His wife. The woman who'd cried with joy when he proposed to her at the top of the Griffith Observatory, the whole city sparkling below them. The woman who'd held his hand in the hospital when his father died. How could he possibly suspect her? But the signs kept piling up. One evening over dinner, he casually mentioned, "You know, I've been thinking we should plan a trip. Just the 2 of us. It's been a while since we took real couple time." Fiona barely looked up, poking at her salad. Maybe next year. I've got several big projects right now. I can't afford to be away. Her rejection was swift, automatic, as if she'd had the answer ready before he'd even asked. That's when Elliot made his decision. If he was crazy, if he was imagining things in his paranoid head, a professional would tell him so. And if he wasn't, well, he needed to know the truth. On a Monday morning during lunch break, Elliot Googled "Private Investigator Los Angeles." There were more options than he'd expected. He read reviews, compared prices, and finally scheduled a meeting with an agency called Cascade Investigations. The detective who met him was Marcus Webb, a man in his mid-50s with neatly trimmed gray hair and a quietly professional demeanor. Elliot told him everything: the behavioral changes, the phone passcode, the constant workshops, the emotional distance. Marcus listened without interrupting, jotting occasional notes in a notepad. When Elliot finished, Marcus asked, "Do you want to confirm your suspicions or keep doubting yourself?" "I need to know the truth," Elliot replied, his voice firmer than he'd expected. "Then we'll find it," Marcus said. The next 12 days were the longest of Elliot's life. He'd wake up, go to work, pretend everything was normal. He'd come home, have dinner with Fiona, watch TV beside her while his mind was miles away. She'd leave for her workshops, and he'd stay awake late into the night, unable to sleep, imagining where she really was and who she was with. The uncertainty was a quiet kind of torture that consumed every silent moment. On the morning of the 12th day, a plain brown envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just Elliot's address neatly typed on the front. He waited until Fiona left for a photo session before opening it. Inside was a 14-page report and a series of high-quality photographic prints. Elliot sat at the kitchen table, his hands cold despite the AC being off and the typical October heat of LA. He started reading. The report was meticulous, detached, factual. Date, time, location. October 15th, 7:23 p.m., the Perch Coffee Shop on Sunset Boulevard. Fiona Hayes met with a man identified as Sterling Paxton, age 41, relationship consultant. Duration of meeting, 2 hours and 17 minutes. Observed physical contact, hands interlaced, farewell kiss in the parking lot. Elliot turned the page with fingers barely responding to his brain's commands. There was more. October 18th, 8:15 p.m., the Standard Hotel on the Sunset Strip. Fiona and Sterling entered together. Left 3 hours later. October 22nd, same location, similar pattern. October 25th, Sterling's office, Wilshire Boulevard in West LA, after business hours. Curtains were drawn, but through a side gap, images were captured. The photographs confirmed every word of the report. Fiona laughing, head thrown back, her hand on the arm of a tall man with wavy brown hair. Sterling Paxton. His face was familiar in a way that made Elliot's stomach sink even deeper. He knew that face. He'd seen that practiced smile, those eyes trained to appear empathetic. Sterling Paxton was the relationship consultant with psychology credentials they'd hired 8 months earlier. The memory hit like a punch. Last February. Fiona had suggested they attend a few couples therapy sessions. Not because we have problems, she'd said, but to strengthen what we already have. Prevention, you know. Elliot had thought it odd at the time. They didn't fight, had no major conflicts, but he'd agreed because she'd seemed so enthusiastic. They'd attended 6 sessions with Sterling Paxton in his sleek Century City office. Elliot remembered those sessions. Sterling asked open-ended questions, listened intently, took notes on his iPad. He'd prompt each of them to express their feelings and needs. He'd suggest connection exercises to do at home. And all that time, he'd been studying their marriage. Identifying weaknesses. Gaining Fiona's trust. Laying groundwork. The photos kept coming. Sterling and Fiona kissing against her car. Sterling's hand on Fiona's waist as they entered a hotel. One particularly clear shot showed them through his office window. She sat on the edge of his desk, he stood close, nearly touching her, faces inches apart. The final page of the report included an extra note from Marcus Webb. During surveillance, we placed a recorder in Mrs. Hayes's vehicle, with your authorization, to capture relevant conversations. Audio files available upon request. Additional observation: Sterling Paxton has a history of unprocessed ethical complaints. For former clients reported inappropriate behavior but later withdrew their complaints. Legal consultation is recommended. Elliot couldn't process it all. It was too much information, too many layers of betrayal. It wasn't just an affair. It was a professional breach of trust. It was predatory. Sterling had used his position, his psychological training, to manipulate his wife. And Fiona. Fiona had allowed it. She'd chosen this. He carefully folded the report, placed the photos back in the envelope. Then he grabbed his phone and called Marcus. I need the audio files. All of them. And I want the contact for that lawyer you mentioned who specializes in professional ethics. The audio files have already been sent via encrypted email, Marcus replied. The lawyer's name is Rachel Morrison. She's handled 3 cases against therapists. I'll send you her details. That night, Elliot listened to the recordings. He had to pause several times, nausea rising in his throat. Fiona and Sterling chatting casually about him. Sterling saying, Elliot is emotionally closed off. You deserve someone who truly sees you. Fiona laughing, he barely notices when I'm in the same room. Sterling, in that soft, manipulative voice, you're outgrowing him, Fiona. It's only natural to seek connection elsewhere. It got worse. Sterling saying, don't feel guilty. Your just meeting needs your marriage doesn't fulfill. It's self-care, really. And Fiona, voice full of relief, you always know what to say. That's why I trust you. Elliot turned off the audio, hands pressed to his face. Sterling had used therapeutic jargon, psychological concepts, to justify infidelity. He'd reframed cheating as self-care. He'd painted Elliot as the emotionally negligent villain while positioning himself as the compassionate savior. The next 5 days were spent in meticulous preparation. Elliot contacted Rachel Morrison, who reviewed all the material and confirmed, this isn't just unethical. It's a serious violation of professional trust, involving emotional abuse and misuse of your therapist's position for personal gain. Unauthorized session recordings. We've got a strong case. They developed a strategy. Rachel would contact the licensing board to file a formal complaint. Elliot, meanwhile, would confront both of them, but not alone at home, where he could be denied or gaslit. He had a better plan. The following Tuesday, Elliot texted Fiona, I've been thinking. You were right about therapy. I think we should go back to Sterling. I booked an emergency session for tonight at 7. Is that okay? Fiona replied after 15 minutes, sure. Good idea. Elliot arrived at Sterling's office at 6:45 p.m. The building was modern, with mirrored glass and a minimalist interior. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor, Suite 304. The door bore a discreet plaque, Sterling Paxton, Relationship and Couples Consulting. He walked in. The receptionist had already left for the day. Sterling was alone, organizing papers at his desk. Elliot. Sterling stood with that warm, professional smile that now seemed obscene. Great to see you're ready to resume sessions. Where's Fiona? She'll be here soon, Elliot replied, closing the door behind him. But before she arrives, I wanted to set something up. He pulled a USB drive from his backpack. I brought some materials I think will be helpful for our discussion tonight. Sterling frowned, confused, but nodded. His office had a large wall-mounted TV he occasionally used to show educational relationship videos. Elliot plugged in the drive and grabbed the remote. Fiona arrived 5 minutes later, slightly out of breath. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was impossible." She stopped short, seeing both men standing, tension thick in the air. "What's going on?" "Sit down, Fiona," Elliot said, his voice calm but firm in a way she rarely heard. "Sterling, you too. You'll both want to be seated for this." Sterling tried to reclaim professional control. "Elliot, you seem upset. Why don't we start by talking about what you're feeling?" "Oh, we'll talk." Elliot pressed play on the remote. The TV screen lit up. The first image showed Fiona and Sterling on October 15 at Blue Moon Coffee House, hands interlaced on the table. A timestamp in the corner. Elliot let 5 seconds of silence pass before switching to the next. Sterling and Fiona kissing in the parking lot. Next. Entering the Dragonfly Hotel together. Next. Exiting hours later. Fiona went pale. Literally. All color drained from her face like water draining away. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Sterling, however, made one last attempt at control. "Elliot, I know this looks bad, but there's context you don't understand. Fiona was in a very vulnerable place, and I..." "Shut up." Elliot spoke softly, but each word cut like a blade. He kept flipping through the photos. "Before you try to manipulate me with more psychological jargon, let me show you the rest." He switched to the audio files. Sterling's voice filled the room. "Elliot is emotionally closed off. You deserve someone who truly sees you." Sterling stood abruptly. "You had no right to record. You can complain about the recordings, but I'm sure everything was done properly, with support from a licensed professional." Elliot kept playing. Sterling calling infidelity self-care. Sterling saying Fiona was outgrowing Elliot. Each sentence was another brick in a wall of evidence. Fiona finally found her voice, though it came out as a broken whisper. "Elliot, I didn't know how to tell me you were having an affair with the therapist we paid to strengthen our marriage." Elliot finished for her. "Yeah, that would be tough to word right." He paused the audio and turned to Sterling, who now looked far less composed. The therapist had backed against the wall, hands raised defensively. "You don't understand the complex dynamic." "Complex dynamic?" Elliot took a step forward. "You mean the dynamic where you used your position of trust to seduce my wife? Where you kept recordings and session notes in insecure locations that leaked, and used confidential info to manipulate her?" Sterling's face finally showed real fear. "You broke into my..." "No. My private investigator did his job and found the recordings and notes you carelessly left exposed." Elliot pulled another sheet from his backpack. "Do you remember Diane Murphy? Jennifer Tao? Sarah Kellerman? Allison Grant?" He read each name slowly. "For former clients who filed complaints against you. For women you convinced to withdraw their accusations because it would be embarrassing and traumatic for them. But I spoke to each of them this week. And they've all agreed to testify." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Sterling opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. Fiona had tears streaming down her face, but Elliot felt none of the automatic compassion he normally would. He felt something closer to indifference. "Sterling," Elliot continued, "at 8 a.m. tomorrow, my attorney will file a formal complaint with your licensing board. We have evidence of client misconduct, unauthorized recordings, confidentiality breaches, and misuse of privileged information for manipulation. You're going to lose your license. And you'll likely face other consequences as well." Sterling sank into his chair, head in his hands. All that professional confidence had evaporated, leaving only a pathetic man who'd abused his power for ego. Elliot turned to Fiona. She looked at him desperately, searching for something: forgiveness, understanding, a chance. He offered none. "Fiona, you have until Friday to move your things out of the house. My divorce attorney will contact you tomorrow. It won't be complicated since we have no kids and the house is in my name. You can keep the cats." "Elliot, please." Fiona stood, took a step toward him. "He confused me. He said things that made sense at the time. I wasn't thinking clearly." "No," Elliot raised his hand. "I'm not going to hear how you were a victim of his manipulation. You're a smart, capable 34-year-old woman. You had multiple chances to stop this. To tell me. To end it. But you didn't. So now it's over." He unplugged the USB drive and returned it to his backpack. Before leaving, he turned once more to Sterling. "Oh, and one last thing. Those other 4 women? They're also filing civil suits against you. One of them is married to a federal prosecutor. He's very interested in reviewing your billing practices. You billed for sessions you never held, that's already under investigation. It could bring serious consequences." The color that had already drained from Sterling's face was replaced by a sickly green tint. Elliot didn't wait for a response. He simply walked out, closing the door with a soft, final click. The following months were a whirlwind of legal paperwork and emotional bureaucracy. The divorce was swift because Fiona didn't contest anything. She signed the papers silently, without negotiation or resistance. Rachel Morrison presented the case to the licensing board with surgical precision. Sterling tried hiring 3 different attorneys, all refused once they saw the evidence. By March, 6 months after Elliot received that brown envelope, Sterling Paxton was formally disciplined by the Professional Counselors Board and lost his license to practice. The ruling was made public in official statements, accessible to anyone. He also faced legal action and investigations over improper billing practices tied to fabricated session charges over 3 years, totaling nearly $90,000. The 4 women Sterling had previously manipulated filed a joint civil lawsuit. The settlement was sealed, but rumors said he had to sell his house and car to pay. The last Elliot heard of Sterling was through Marcus Webb, who mentioned seeing the former consultant working at a customer service call center. Fiona tried to rebuild her photography career, but the scandals association was devastating. Several corporate clients canceled contracts once the story leaked on Los Angeles social media circles. She eventually moved to San Francisco, where no one knew her name or face. Elliot heard through mutual friends that she was working at a photography equipment store, taking product shots for online catalogs. As for Elliot, the first few months were tough, not because he missed Fiona, that feeling faded faster than expected, but because he had to process the layered betrayal. It wasn't just his wife. It was the professional they'd trusted. It was the system meant to protect vulnerable people but that had repeatedly failed. It was realizing other women had suffered in silence out of fear or shame. He entered real therapy with a professional recommended by Rachel, a woman named Dr. Patricia Chen who treated everything with genuine seriousness and ethics. She helped him process not just the betrayal, but the guilt he felt for not seeing it sooner. People who abuse trust are skilled, she explained in one session. They study, plan, execute. You didn't fail. You were targeted. By September, almost a year after the initial discovery, Elliot was in a very different mental place. The house felt lighter without the toxic energy of the marriage's final months. He'd renovated the office, turning it into a space that was truly his own. He'd started dating again, nothing serious, just occasional dinners that reminded him genuine connection was still possible. One Saturday afternoon, while shopping at Whole Foods, Elliot ran into Fiona. She was alone, pushing a cart with just a few items. They saw each other at the same moment. For a second, neither reacted. Then Fiona took the first step, slowly approaching. "Hi, Elliot." "Fiona." He nodded, cordial but distant. She looked older somehow, new lines around her eyes he didn't remember. I heard about Sterling. He really lost everything. Yes. Actions have consequences. Elliot kept his tone neutral. Fiona bit her lower lip, an old nervous tic. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. I'm sorry. For what I did. For what I let happen. I don't even know what I was thinking. He said so many things that made sense at the time, but now I see it was all manipulation. Elliot finished. He was a professional at it. You saved other women from going through what I went through, she said softly. What we went through. I should have been stronger. Should have seen through him. Elliot was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. When he spoke, his voice held no anger, just calm clarity. Fiona, Sterling abused his position of trust. But you still made choices. You chose to keep going to those meetings. Chose to lie. Chose to put that passcode on your phone. He may have manipulated, but you carried it out. Both things are true. She nodded, tears forming. I know. I know. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. It's not about deserving. Elliot adjusted the grocery bag on his shoulder. It's about moving forward. You with your life, me with mine. I truly hope you find peace and make better choices. But that no longer involves me. He started to walk away, but she called out, Elliot? He stopped, looked back. Are you okay? Elliot considered the question. Was he? Not in the way he'd been before everything happened, that naivety, that blind trust, would never return. But something new had taken its place. Resilience. Clarity about his own worth that didn't rely on someone else's validation. I'm getting better every day, he answered honestly. And it was true. That night, sitting on the couch with one of the cats curled beside him, Elliot reflected on how far he'd come. 12 days of investigation had turned into 6 months of legal proceedings, which became a year of rebuilding. Sterling Paxton had used his position and expertise to manipulate situations and people for years. But his arrogance was his downfall. He believed he was too smart to get caught, that women were too weak to speak up, that the system would look the other way. He'd been wrong on every count. The 4 women he'd manipulated before Fiona finally got justice. Their marriages couldn't be saved, the damage was already done, but at least they knew they hadn't been crazy, weak, or at fault. The system had failed them at first, but eventually it worked. Elliot sometimes wondered whether Sterling felt genuine remorse or just regret at getting caught. He'd probably never know, and realized it didn't matter. What mattered was that Sterling couldn't do this to anyone else from that powerful, credible position. As for Fiona, Elliot sincerely hoped she found a path toward healing and honesty with herself. But he didn't need to be part of that journey. He had no obligation to forgive or forget. Only to move forward with dignity. And that's exactly what he was doing. 2 years after that therapy session that never happened, that confrontation in a sleek office overlooking Century City, Elliot was in a completely different place. He'd been promoted at work, taking on a senior role that came with more responsibility and respect. He'd completely renovated the house, transforming every space to reflect who he was now, not who he'd been during that marriage. More importantly, he'd met someone. Jennifer was a literature teacher at a local school, had a sarcastic sense of humor that made him laugh genuinely, and, most crucially, communicated with refreshing honesty. They were taking things slowly, building trust brick by brick without rushing or forcing anything. One night, while dining at a Thai restaurant in Los Feliz, Jennifer asked something no one else had dared to ask directly, "Do you still think about her? About what happened?" Elliot chewed his pad thai, giving the question the serious consideration it deserved. "I do. Not as much as before. And when I do, it's different now. At first, it was anger, pain, humiliation. Now it's more like a scar. It's there. It's part of my story. But it doesn't hurt in daily life anymore. And the therapist? Sterling? He got what he deserved. Justice works slowly, but eventually it works. Elliot took a sip of iced tea. You know what bothers me most now? It's not what she did. It's how long I doubted myself. How many times I thought I was being paranoid, overreacting, crazy. Gaslighting works, even when it's not intentional. Jennifer reached across the table and took his hand. You trusted your instincts eventually. And you acted. Yes. I acted. He squeezed her hand back, grateful for the simple honesty of that touch. No hidden agendas. No secrets. Just basic, human connection. That night, driving home, Elliot passed the street where Sterling's old office had been. The building was still there, but Suite 304 now housed a graphic design firm. Sterling's nameplate had been replaced long ago. It was as if he'd never existed there. And maybe that was for the best. Some people don't deserve to be remembered beyond the lessons they teach. Sterling Paxton taught Elliot about people who weaponize empathy. About institutions that fail to protect the vulnerable. About trusting your instincts even when everyone around you says you're wrong. But above all, he taught that survival isn't just about overcoming pain. It's about rebuilding with intelligence, dignity, and the determination not to let others' actions define your future. Elliot Hayes was a man of numbers. But he'd learned that some equations have no clean solutions. Some variables are chaotic and unpredictable. And sometimes, the right answer isn't fixing what's broken, but building something entirely new from the pieces left behind. As he pulled into his driveway, seeing the porch light he'd installed the previous month, Elliot felt something he hadn't expected to feel again: peace. Not the naive peace of someone who's never been betrayed. But the hard-won peace of someone who stared into the abyss, refused to jump, and chose instead to walk back toward the light. And that peace, he knew, was truly his, built with his own hands, protected by his own choices, sustained by his own strength. No one could ever take that away again. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.